Hey everyone, I'm Kieran, and welcome back to Dirty 20s D&D. This is going to be a new series that's going to air on Fridays until I've exhausted every possibility regarding homebrewing stuff for D&D 5e. I've been dungeon mastering consistently for about 3 years now, and I've been playing on and off for at least a decade, if not more. Since I've started, I've always loved how pen and paper games allow for such extreme freedoms regarding making up your own stuff. They can do things that modern video games will never achieve, writing something on paper and having it just exist now. So, in this series, I'm going to try to explain my thought processes behind how I've homebrewed something for nearly every aspect of this game. So stick around to learn about how to homebrew spells. First, a tip that I will be repeating in every single one of these episodes, where it's relevant, of course. Ignore balance when you're starting to work on something homebrewed. The hardest thing you will encounter is trying to ensure something is balanced while you don't even know what you're doing yet. You will be fighting yourself the whole time, and you'll burn out before you even finish. To help display what I mean as I'm going through this process, we're going to make a couple of spells today. One that deals damage, and another that is more focused on utility. So, when starting with spells, you have to consider what you want it to do. Your greatest desires for this ability. For me, I want a spell that sends a wave of fire around me, let's say. I don't know. And it lights the ground on fire as well, burning enemies' feet. And another spell that I want is one that lets me see the past in a location that I'm in. Say a bomb went off and I walk up to the area and create an illusion that shows me what happened there. So now that we know what our spells want to do, we have to compare them to other spells. For our first one, our Incendiary wave, we should look at large area spells and also at spells that leave areas of effect on the ground. So, Fireball, Cone of Cold, good examples for that first one, and Spike Growth is a great one for the second one. The level of these, Cone of Cold being 5 and Spike Growth being 2, so if I don't want my new spell to be 7 or 8, I should mellow the 2 out when I'm combining them. But balance is for later. Right now, we're just gonna push it all together and see what happens. Second, for our Temporal Hindsight spell, we're going to want to look at big illusory spells and at identifying spells so you can create the image and identify what needs to go into the image. So I looked at 3rd level major image and 1st level identify. We don't want our thing to be crazy high level because after a certain point the spell loses utility. It's a mystery solving spell. So I chose those two so that I could create large area of sights and sounds and identify magical traces and marks left around. 4th level is probably a good target to hit. Taking anything away might remove the spell's utility. Next thing to consider is when your spell should be accessed. If you want your spell to be big, it's going to be higher level, which means a lot of characters might never get it. So take into consideration if a spell is better in the early or later game and start to tune it to that. I want Incendiary Wave to be big, but not too big. So I'm going to aim for 5th-ish level with that one. And like I said before, 4th seems pretty good for Temporal Hindsight. So now that we know our levels, we can look at the spell damage table and speculate 8d6 for our wave spell's initial damage and keep that 2d4 for the lingering damage from Spike Growth as the inspiration, and Temporal Hindsight doesn't need damage tuning, so that is just whatever for now. Next, the bolded guys need satisfying. That is your casting time, range, components, duration, and class is available. By now you should probably be able to fit a few of those. For classes, I'm going to give Incendiary Wave to Sorcerers, Wizards, and Warlocks, and Temporal Hindsight is just going to Wizards. It's Chronergy, and that makes sense to me. Next is casting time. Casting time for the wave should be an action. It's being used in combat. Hindsight, on the other hand, should take longer. It's a big deal. It reveals a lot of information. It should also last longer than an instant. So I'm going to give it a casting time of a minute. We don't want either of these to be ritual, because you don't make damage spells like that ritual, and hindsight being ritual means that it could be used an unlimited number of times, which could ruin all mysteries. It has to be a serious consideration to use it. That's why it's 4th level. It's slightly higher than the lower level ones, but not too high that it's useless by the time you get it. After that, we need to look at range. Range for the wave should be 60-ish feet, just a big old ring of fire around you. Maybe 60 feet sounds pretty okay for a 5th level spell that deals 8d6 damage, especially because it could also hit your allies, so you're really going to have to take into consideration, unless you're an evocation wizard, or a sorcerer with this meta magic. I don't know which one it is. Odaluk's, as an example for this damage, deals 10d6 or something like that with the same radius, and it's 6th level, so it's fine. And the range for the hindsight should also be about 60 feet. That's half the range of Major Image. You don't really need to be far away from this, but it's good to sort of give yourself a little bit of space. For the components, a combat spell like Incendiary Wave really shouldn't require anything to be consumed. It might need a valued component, but for now we're just going to compare it with like Fireball. So we give it verbal, somatic, and a non-consumed material, like a piece of charcoal. Why not? And then for our hindsight guy, VSM as well, and while this more logically could require a consumed or a valued component, we're going to set it up with a simple small hourglass for now, and maybe come back to it later. It's important that material components hold some connection to the spell. When you're making a spell, it wouldn't make sense for any of these components to not be related. Like if we flipped these two around, it wouldn't make any sense at all. So having them make sense where they are is good. It means that they're unique to those spells. Lastly, for the bolded guys, duration. We're going to set Incendiary Wave to instantaneous. We might change that for the lasting effect. We'll see. Like I said, lay everything out now, balance it later. And then for the hindsight, we're going to set it to concentration, obviously, because the spell lasts a while. It's not really a combat spell, and you should be able to drop it whenever you want to. Maybe an hour sounds okay for now. And like I said, all of this can change later. So now for the last part of planning a spell out, writing the spell. For Incendiary Wave, we have outlined that in a 60-foot radius, a blast of fire bursts out from you instantaneously, igniting the ground. It initially deals 8d6 fire damage, and then every 5 feet a creature other than you moves along the scorched ground. They take another 2d4 fire damage. Good for now. And for the other one, we said it's based on Major Image, so we should look at that spell. It affects a 20-foot cube, so let's use that. A 20-foot cube has illusory images appear in it from the last 10 minutes, and obviously you can hold concentration for an hour to fast forward, rewind, play, pause, everything in the area until you lose concentration or the spell ends. Now for balancing them, the very important part. If anything seemed off before, we're going to fix it now. If I had said 12d6 for the damage of the wave, I would either have to raise the level or lower the damage. But I think I'm going to instead change the duration. I am going to make a concentration up to a minute, and that is tied to the burning ground. Once you stop focusing, it stops burning. If I had Temporal Hindsight be a 60-foot cube with a 360-foot range, or looking back over the last 10 years, we'd need to rein that in a bit, or make it like 9th level, because that's crazy. So, if you're making this spell for your character, consider what you would say if a player of yours came to you, their DM, and asked you to use the spell. Would you say yes? Last but not least, casting at higher levels. Not every spell needs an at higher levels condition. A lot of them don't have them. For both of these, I'm going to give examples because I set them up that way. For damage dealing spells, it's a very easy process. Usually you're just going to add more dice. For this one, 1d6 more initial fire damage per level cast higher. And for Temporal Hindsight, we can get a little creative. We're going to increase the amount of time you can peer back in the area. We're going to leave the concentration at an hour, but now if you cast it at level 6, you can look back an hour instead of 10 minutes. If you cast it at level 8, you can look back over the last 24 hours in that area. And if you cast it at level 9, you can look back over the last week. Higher level castings allow you to peer back through more time, which means you can be later to an event. So you're investigating a murder that happened 3 days ago, but you're like the guy for investigating murders. You just drop this 9th level spell and bam, you know exactly who did it. So now, if you follow this guide, hopefully you've emerged at the other side with a balanced, fun, innovative spell to either show your players or use alongside your allies in your game. I hope this was useful. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all again very soon for another episode of How to Homebrew. Next time, we're going to be taking a look at feats, so if that interests you, subscribe here to the channel to be notified right away as that video goes live. Thank you again, and have a good day, everybody.